Good day. Thank you for joining us again for the weekly Frankly Speaking Jamaica podcast. Please continue to share, like, and comment on the channel. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Today I hope to point you a little to how Jamaica is changing before our very eyes. You should see the connection in this podcast in the segments dealing with funerals, Bamboo Avenue, and on-street vending. And of course, through the newspapers, and that's where we'll start. The Sunday Observer leads with an appeal by Dr. Nigel Clark, the Finance Minister, and he's calling for calm and some patience in the industrial relations sector. And you know, that was very hot last week. The Observer also carries an article by Dr. Clark on the matter of wages and salaries for public sector workers. The Sunday Observer remembers Barabara Gloudon, who once wrote a column for that paper. And Clovis has a classic cartoon on the late journalist, author, and broadcaster. Sunday Observer writer Romardo Lyons gives us one of those stories of hope, featuring Marvin Price, who at 15 could not read. Marvin Price was one of 13 children for his mother, who had to carry the burden of the family after his father left their home. But now Marvin Price is pursuing a bachelor's degree in religion and theology. He's expected to graduate in August and work as a pastor. It's a good read. Ban up in smoke is the Gleaner's lead story about the smoking ban that should be existing in Jamaica, but there's hardly any place that is being obeyed and followed. Inside of the paper, Tyrone Reid, Gareth Davis, and Carl Gilchrist take us into various communities, various parishes, where they point out that the ban is just not being observed, and there are few penalties that are being proffered. Also in the Sunday Gleaner, the Freeport community in Montego Bay fights the location of an upscale hotel in that community. Upscale hotel at that. And also in the Sunday Gleaner today, in the focus section, we are reminded that a state visit, a 4-day state visit by the President of India is taking place starting on Sunday. And now to Frankly Speaking. Bamboo Avenue, or Holland Bamboo in St. Elizabeth, used to be a refreshing, looked forward to landmark. Of course, frankly speaking, we are referring to simpler times when these small things held our fascination. People who knew what it was rule what it has become. Some even argue that it could be a great attraction for tourists. Bamboo Avenue ought to be a landmark, a green attraction, and an eco buffer for us in a country where there is so much ugliness in our environment. Now, stripped of the myths of how it came to be, such as whether indeed the bamboos were planted to supply steamships, Holland Bamboo once was a rather cool place where abundant growth of bamboo provided a welcome, towering change to the semi-arid scenery in that part of St. Elizabeth and Jamaica. Frankly speaking, Bamboo Avenue showed off bamboos so luxuriant in growth, so thickly intertwined they formed an arch over the roadway, blocking out the sky and changing the light intensity. And there was no easy looking through the sides to see the green of sugarcane and other crops that hemmed in the avenue of bamboo. Frankly speaking, it's awfully different now. The ride through is usually unpleasant. The road surface is pitted and potholed in parts, and even though there is at least one good rest stop, mostly it's an ugly scene. You know, it wouldn't take much resolve to fix it, to make it better, to stop and turn back the deterioration of the last several decades. Frankly speaking, Bamboo Avenue is just another of those places where we have fouled our nest. Journalist Desmond Richards takes on the story of the week, the strikes and industrial relations murmurs, and he argues there is a bigger issue.
As usual, my plate is filled with local issues. But I must pay tribute to Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, murdered by Zionist forces last week, and my own lioness, Barabara Gloudon. Long live the warriors for press freedom. Well, after 40 years of wage guidelines, wage restraints, bang your belly policies, the workers are fed up, their cups overflowing with grief and suffering. We must remember, that during the 50s, 60s, and up to the early 1970s, trade unions were able to negotiate wages which kept workers afloat. They were not big wages, but at least they were on par with the cost of living. In fact, wage increases moved by 135% between 1970 and 1975, compared with the cost of living increase of 100%. So workers were able to buy a little more bread and a little more butter. And the workers, as we know, are accustomed to suffering. Just remember that our forefathers worked for 400 years for nothing. So we are accustomed to that. What the workers are not accustomed to is the elevated level of arrogance spewing from national hero circles. This can't work. And let us ask ourselves, who are going to be the beneficiaries of this new reclassification exercise? The ministers and the big civil servants, of course. When permanent secretary salaries climb up to between 18 and 24 million annually, the ministers' salaries are going to climb accordingly. So they will be able to stuff their wallets with dollars, buy back high-end vehicle after every 3 years, while the workers continue to survive on starvation salaries. No, it can't work. The disparity between income in Jamaica is too wide. This is an opportunity to do something about it now. And those who are accusing the workers of burning down the house, let me urge them to talk to the Minister of Arrogance, who is providing fuel, and it is inflammatory.
That is Desmond Richards, businessman and journalist. On to Jamaica perspective. I have been reminded of my promise to keep Jamaican perspective before you. Funerals. If you have been to one or been a part of planning one in recent years, you know they have changed a lot. Elkanah Rule, educator and author, takes us back several decades, around the 90s and 1950s and early 60s, to what the loss of someone meant to a whole community. And his reference point is Wanda Bolas over there in St. Catherine. Elkanah Rule, author, educator, and he's going to tell us now about funerals those days, back in the late 50s, going into the 60s.
First, when someone died, someone rushed to the nearest church, no matter what religion the person belonged to, while a bell was there, to start tolling the bell. They called it dead bell in my community and many other communities in rural Jamaica. They called that bell dead bell. So the tolling of the bell would go according, the pattern established was for 2 strikes for a male, bang bang, at intervals of say about a couple of seconds, bang bang, bang bang, and a single strike for a female, bang, bang, and everybody in the community would know that someone had died. From there to the dead yard, and if it were early in the morning, everybody joined in making preparation for the setup. The setup would have to be held the same night, and so the preparation had to start right away.
Why is this? Why is this? So we're talking, why would the preparation have to start right away? Is that because there were no funeral homes or they were far away or what?
That's right. So the dead had to be buried in 24 hours. That was one reason, but there was also some superstition to it. they believed that the spirits had to be caught and bounded. And if the third day had arrived before the funeral take place, the spirit would be too elusive to be bound and would be all over the community making trouble and creating all kinds of problems for people. So they would prepare for the setup that very night by acquiring coffee, bread, chocolate, rum. Rum was an integral part of the preparation. Rum had to flow. If there was nothing else, rum had to be there. And the people who came there, they would not compromise. They wanted rum. And if there was no rum, they would start singing. There was a little song that they sung when the rum was not flowing. You wrong, Fisin, come call me, you're wrong. The following day would be the day when they prepared for the burial.
That's Elkanah Rule, whose several books remind us of that simpler, tougher, but kinder and lovelier Jamaica. That's part 1 on the sociology of funerals in Jamaica. Now to outlook. So I'm still talking about change. That change is inevitable, is axiomatic, and a cliche. But it doesn't have to be for the worse. Have you noticed how commonplace it is, especially in Jamaica's rural towns and parish capitals, for parking spaces now on the road to be taken up by vendors, not just with carts or stalls, but selling from their vehicles? Here's a bit of mathematics that mayors and people who run and work in the municipal corporations and the police, especially PSTEB or the traffic police, should understand. When someone is allowed to take up a parking space with his car or van, or to erect a tent or operate a stall in an area designated for parking on the road, that person is not taking up one parking spot for the day. As bad as that would be, just remember that the typical person going to conduct business in that area, they want to park for anywhere, say, between 15 minutes and an hour, get what they want done and move on. So let's say the average person will take, on average, half an hour. Someone who illegally parks there from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening to operate his fruit, haberdashery, or clothing store is taking up parking space that could have been used by 20 vehicles, each motorist using half an hour in a business in that parking space. Got it? It's simple. That's part of the reason for the congestion in our disorderly and chaotic towns. The mayors and municipal authority staff are failing almost everywhere in this regard. I would not forgive myself for failing to mention and pay my own tribute on the passing of Barabara Gloudon this past week. This woman of substance, this broadcaster, journalist, playwright, and woman of principle served our nation well. She loved Jamaica deeply, and her courage to stand up for what she thought was right was on display from her early days at the Gluedown, when she fought against the publication of half-naked photos of women that used to be a staple in the Star. Her fight had consequences, and her life as well. Rest in peace, Barbara. That's our program for this week. Thank you as ever for joining us. Please share this podcast, and we welcome your comments. If you haven't yet done so, please subscribe to this Frankly Speaking Jamaica podcast channel. Until then, I'm Franklin McKnight.